Tuesday afternoon, the house threw a sound back at me that it had never learned. Laughter that wasn't mine, bright and tinny, ricocheting off walls I had sanded and painted with my own hands. It landed wrong, like a fork dropped in a church. I stepped inside and my purse slipped from my shoulder, thumping onto the entryway tile, lipstick skittering toward the baseboard. The wood floor beyond it waited like an old friend. I crossed it slow, feeling the faint cupped seam where we'd joined planks piece by piece. The way your fingers find the line of a scar even when you're not looking. Sloane Mercer's voice came first, rehearsed warmth varnished onto every syllable. And here the morning light just pours in. It's very welcoming. Ethan Caldwell stood with a notepad and a contractor's pen, eyes cataloging trim lines and vent covers. He smelled like metal and cotton, like job sites and laundry. Square footage again? He asked. 4,000, Sloane said, flipping a glossy folder as if it were a magic trick. The appraisal puts us in a very attractive position at 480. That's $480,000 given recent comps. The number detonated in my chest. Not because I didn't know it, because she said it here. The exact price spoken in my kitchen, a private sum broadcast like a weather report. I stepped into the frame. What you mean, I said, is that the appraisal puts my property at that number. Sloane turned, surprise smoothing instantly into poise. Her smile barely touched her eyes. I noticed the calculation there, quick as lint caught by sunlight. Nora, she said, too bright. We were just finishing up a second look. Your laugh carried, I said. I followed the echo. Ethan coughed a polite apology. Ms. Whitaker, I didn't realize you were back. I wasn't, I said. My voice came out calm. Too calm. The kind of calm that has edges. I am now. Sloane placed a palm on the island like it belonged to her and tilted her head. We're trying to make this transition easy, given your season. You've already lived your life. The line slid across the air like a blade. I looked at her, at the red mouth, the impossible lashes, the hand on my countertop, and felt something more primitive wake inside me, something that didn't wear nice words. I held it on a leash. You've just started ruining yours, I said. Silence dropped a beat too long. Ethan recovered first. I should go, he murmured, closing his notebook. He offered a hand he didn't expect me to take. And I didn't. Thank you for letting me look, he said to the room, as if the house itself had given permission. Attractive position or not, I said, this is not a showpiece. It's a home, he nodded, honest enough to look chastened, and made for the door. The latch took its time, and then there was a clean door click, and the laughter sound finally bled out of the hall. Sloane stayed where she was, smile carved thinner. How dare you humiliate me, she said softly, words made for velvet and knives. In front of a qualified buyer, in front of the future you need. What I need, I said, is to not hear the price of my house used like a party favor in my kitchen. And I need you to stop saying we and our when you mean me and mine. Her nostrils flared, just barely. This is gratitude? After all the ways I've tried to help? After all the guidance I've given your son? Entitlement pretending to be generosity is still entitlement, I said. Guidance without consent is control. And you didn't give my son anything he didn't first hand you. She laughed then, the same bright note from before, but now brittle. You are being difficult in a delicate moment. Ethan is an engineer, a serious man. He could have been a blessing. Ethan is not the point, I said. My property is the point. I let the correction land and watched it make the tiniest bruise on her pride. The calculation flickered again. Some private math I wasn't privy to. Numbers rearranging behind her eyes. You think you can keep Caleb, she said. You think you can hold him in this mausoleum and make the world stand still? I think I can stand in my home and decide who sells it, I said. And who doesn't. People your age, she began, and that primitive thing inside me pulled on its leash hard enough to burn my palm. Stop, I said, while you can still pretend this was a misunderstanding. For a moment we breathed the same air and it felt thin. She gathered her folder, spine snapping straight. This conversation isn't over. It is, I said. For today. I stepped past her and the floorboards answered under my weight, old wood speaking old truths. I took the stairs steady, one after the other, my hand finding the smooth newel Tom once teased me for over-sanding. At the landing, I could still feel the laugh quivering in the plaster like aftershock. My fingers trembled. I reached my door, eased it shut, and turned the lock. The metal slid home with a small mechanical mercy. My hands were shaking now, finally, as if the permission to tremble required a boundary. I locked the door and sat on the edge of the bed. The quiet upstairs wasn't really quiet. It carried old noises like pressed flowers. I lay back and the ceiling swam, and I fell into the past the way you fall into a familiar chair, muscle memory doing the steering. In 1990, I was an architect who couldn't afford to be just an architect. Mornings, I measured kitchens for a cabinet company. Afternoons, I drafted bathroom elevations in a basement office that smelled like toner and hope. Nights, I waited tables under a humming neon that lit my hands a cheap pink. Our Queen's rental sang in 3 keys at once. Neighbors arguing through vent shafts, the 7 train stitching the horizon, a radiator banging like it had unresolved trauma. I would sit on the window ledge and imagine rooms where sound arrived as light, where a breath didn't need to fight to be heard. Tom anchored the day to me, tea set by my elbow without comment. A shoulder rubbed as if to remind the bones what they were for. "Keep going," he whispered into my hair when my 3rd job ate the last of my softness. "You're building a future that will remember you." By 1995, we had a down payment and a folder of sketches stained with coffee and rain. The land was 4,000 square feet, an irregular lot that most buyers walked past. I felt it the way you feel a good idea in your teeth. I oriented the long axis to the east so morning would thread the rooms like a blessing. Downstairs, I gave us 9'6" ceilings, enough height to breathe and to float light shelves that would bounce the sun deeper into the plan. I drew cross-ventilation like a promise, operable windows facing each other in measured lines, soffits carved to catch summer breezes, returns placed where heat could confess and leave. Closets were not afterthoughts. I made them 28 inches deep with double hangs and a high shelf that would hold the boxes of a life without punishing the shoulders that lifted them. I didn't just draw it. I made it. I learned the weight of a trowel and the stubborn mind of a level. I rolled waterproofing until my forearms ached. The sander sang its coarse hymn and I kept time, hands turning to gloves of callus. Caleb was 3 then, a comet with a lunchbox. He stacked offcuts of 2x4 like cities and announced which blocks were schools and which were bridges. I measured his nap times like concrete cure windows, hustling to set forms before he woke and demanded dinosaurs. We moved in 1998, too early by every sensible metric and exactly on time by mine. There was no baseboard yet in the front room, and the kitchen shelves were raw plywood that smelled like possibility. The house didn't echo like Queen's. It rang like a bell. Morning came in as designed, a soft gold that stepped across the floor and up the far wall, touching each line I had drawn years before as if to sign them. I lay on the subfloor with my arms spread and watched the light climb. Tom lay beside me, his hand a weight on my sternum, a ballast you don't question until it's gone. We had no sofa yet, so we cried on the plywood, faces pressed to the grain, our breath making small clouds in the new space. It wasn't wealth, and it wasn't luck, and it wasn't an asset. It was a translation of sleepless years into wood and air. It was a house that remembered us because we taught it how. When the last box gave up its last thing that week, Tom brought 2 mugs and set them on a paint-splattered plank. He looked at the light and then at me. His eyes were wet and stubborn. "We did it," he said, and I didn't say anything because the words were already water. We did it tears on a subfloor, joy braided with exhaustion. We lived a life inside these walls the way a hand learns a glove, slowly until there was no seam between us and it. Dinners that started with garlic and ended with laughter. Winters measured in firewood. Summers measured in doorways kept open for a cross breeze I had engineered on paper years before. Then one Tuesday, a doctor said, "Stage 4, and the air changed color. We brought the hospital home because we could, and because Tom wanted windows more than fluorescent lights. The bedroom became a ward in small increments. The nightstand turned into a pharmacy. Amber bottles lined up like beads, labels facing outward as if exposition might save us. I sorted pills with the same focus I once used for tile patterns, blue ones at breakfast, half-white ovals at noon, the bitter drops that made a lion sleep laid out on a saucer that used to hold his wedding ring. I learned to time the morphine, and when the tremors took his sentences and made them gravel, I read to him until my voice smoothed the stones. A book wasn't a cure. It was a counterspell, a net thrown over the pain so we could pull a few quiet minutes to shore. Rituals shifted but didn't die. I still brewed tea, now for hydration and comfort, honey measured like medicine. I kept a chart with columns like floor plans. Temp, pain, meds, hours slept. I wrote neatly, as if clarity could bribe fate. I changed sheets with a nurse's economy, tucking corners that had once been for crisp aesthetics but were now for dignity. We learned the gentle choreography of turning, of lifting, of the precise angle that let breath come easier. When the pain broke him open, I placed my palm on his chest where I could feel the drum of his stubborn heart. He would look past me, not at the ceiling, but out the window where morning did what it always did, crossing the wall like a faithful friend. 11 months is a country. We lived there without passports. At the end, his voice was a pencil run down to wood. He didn't look at me. He looked toward the doorway, toward the hall that caught the east light first. He lifted a hand, a small float of fingers that still somehow carried authority, and pointed. "Take care of her," he said. "She is yours too, not me." The house. He gave the blessing to the thing I had built so he could step away, and it stung because it was right. I nodded because promises don't need witnesses, only backbone. After the funeral, the food arrived in covered dishes large enough to feed a platoon. People said all the sentences grief makes people say. When the last lasagna had found its last Tupperware, Caleb stood in the kitchen the way a man stands on new ice, careful and wrong at the same time. His eyes were his father's with more sleep debt. "Mom," he started, and I could feel him rehearsing lines he thought were for grown-ups. "It's too big for one person. The upkeep. The taxes. You shouldn't have to carry all this. You could get a place near the park, elevator, doorman, less, everything." I rinsed a glass until it was clean of everything but water. "This place was never a burden," I said. "It is a promise." He tried again, softer, hands moving like he could conduct me into agreement. "I'm not saying sell tomorrow. Just think about it. Think about what would be easier." "Easier isn't the goal," I said. "Tom asked me to take care of her. I intend to do exactly that," he swallowed. I watched the struggle behind his eyes, a boy's love and a man's practicality trying to share the same chair. He hugged me and I let him be taller. When he left, the door made its ordinary sound and the house exhaled with me. Later, when the guests had become crumbs and the refrigerator hummed like an old friend clearing its throat, I took the small cedar box to the garden. The lemon tree we had planted when we moved in was taller than me now, thorns like little laws. I opened the soil with a trowel I had used for grout and for spring bulbs and for everything in between. I set Tom's ashes at the roots because that's where nourishment belongs. The dust lifted in a gust and touched my wrist like the faintest brush of a familiar hand. "I've got her," I said, which meant both the tree and the house and the part of my life that had suddenly become stewardship. Grief didn't knock me down. It handed me keys and a ledger. I went back inside and ran my palm along the hall, feeling studs and plaster the way you feel for a pulse in the neck. Alone, yes, but anchored. 2 years ago, Caleb showed up with Sloan in tow, and a duffel bag that said, temporary. He had a contract that had fallen through and a landlord who decided to upgrade the tenant mix. Sloan was between jobs, a phrase that floated above specifics like a helium balloon. I said they could stay in the guest room because that's what you say when love knocks with luggage. At first, it was help. The kind that looks like kindness and tastes like swallowing. Sloan loaded the dishwasher and then reloaded it the efficient way, moving plates like chess pieces and narrating it like a tutorial. She labeled the spice jars in a font that sounded like a seminar. She shifted the coffee maker to the other side of the counter to save steps, and I moved it back at night and then pretended in the morning I had forgotten. She bought curtains that screamed a brand, even when they whispered light. The tags waited 2 days before they learned scissors. The language started to tilt. "Our house gets such good morning light," she told a delivery guy, basking in a compliment that belonged to a diagram I had drawn in 1995. "We love our garden," she told the neighbor, waving at the raised beds I had coaxed out of hard soil with compost and patience. Her smile was mirror-trained, every angle chosen. It worked, in the way certain performances work. People liked her on contact. The compliments gathered at her feet like obedient dogs. By 6 months, the kitchen had been reorganized twice. Jars marched in military formation. The drawer where I keep serving spoons became a museum of gadgets that could julienne a carrot into lace. A new sofa arrived of its own accord, the receipt tucked into a glossy bag with a name on it loud enough to read from across the room. Caleb stood between us like a negotiator. "She's just trying to help," he said, the words even, the eyes pleading. "Can we pick our battles?" "They're not battles," I said. "They're borders." Sloane wore clothes that did their own introductions. Logos that didn't need sound. She FaceTimed friends from the patio and called this place the family home, a phrase that elevated her to herald and me to ancestor. "It's perfect for entertaining," she told them. "We're thinking of redoing the dining room so it flows better." "You'll see." By a year, the dining room did not flow better. It flowed Sloane. The wallpaper was a pattern that looked expensive on purpose, and the chandelier made a statement you could hear. She scheduled a small dinner that wasn't small and performed a script I didn't know she'd cast us in. "Welcome to our family home," she said at the door, and the guests nodded because who argues with a smile that neat? I set plates the way I always had, a choreography you can tap out blind, and she moved the knives 1 inch inward as if correcting a child's pencil grip. Caleb caught my eye across the table and mouthed, "Sorry." Later he repeated her talking points back to me like he'd learned them phonetically. "She just wants it to feel cohesive, less dated. More us, more who?" I asked. "Us," he said, and looked scared of the word. At 18 months, the drift had a gravity. Sloane handled deliveries and returns, and the arrival of a velvet chair that belonged in a magazine about rooms where no one lives. Friends began to default to her for plans. She told someone at brunch that the lemon tree was so symbolic, and I watched her make a life out of metaphors that were not hers to mint. She called to a neighbor over the fence, "Our tomatoes are finally thriving," and the sentence landed like a stone on my tongue. I chose not to be that mother-in-law. I swallowed objections until my throat felt raw. I reasoned with myself the way you reason with a weather system. This will pass. Adjust your sails. I told myself I was choosing peace, and what I was actually choosing was silence. Caleb brought me tea sometimes, awkward offerings that tried to bridge a widening cut. "She's under a lot of pressure," he would say. "I know she comes on strong. It's just how she is." "How she is," I said, "is a person who rearranges other people's lives and then calls it help." He winced, the way a boy does when truth walks in without knocking. "She loves me," he said, as if that were a counter-argument and not a separate subject. "Then she can love you without relocating the furniture in my head," I said. He shook his rueful train to triangulate. "Let me mediate," he said. "It's better from me." It wasn't. Every mediation came back translated into Sloane, her vocabulary borrowing his voice. "Mom, I think she just means, Mom, we're trying to, Mom, it would be better if..." The more he relayed, the farther away he sounded. Somewhere between the new sofa and the dining room reveal, something broke between us. Not a shatter. A hairline fracture that ran along old stress lines and only showed itself in certain light. When I saw it, I recognized its geometry. Creeps aren't leaps. They are tugs you pretend not to feel until you notice you're standing somewhere you never meant to go. I made the decision at a corner cafe, a bitter coffee cooling, while I watched strangers claim tables like territories. Confrontation had given Sloane fresh air. Observation would deny it. I bought a pocket notebook from the rack by the register and drew 3 columns: date, find, photo number. When I walked home, I rehearsed nothing. I would look, I would count, I would keep my breath steady. The front door opened on a new scent. Vanilla. Not the warm note of baking, but a diffuser's chemical sweetness. Threading itself through the hall I had kept resolutely unscented for 25 years. The house felt misbuttoned. In the kitchen, 2 plates were already set at the table, napkins tented, cutlery aligned to the inch. Caleb and Sloane moved like a pair who had practiced. "We grabbed something on the way," Sloane called, opening a takeout container and plating for him, for herself. "There are leftovers in the fridge for you." I lifted a tortilla from a styrofoam clamshell, and it cracked in my hand, stiff from an overlong microwave. My teeth found it the way a bad memory finds the soft part of your rib cage. I chewed and smiled at no one. At midnight, the house finally released all the borrowed voices. I left the lights off and let my eyes find the gray. Crime scenes are quiet because they have nothing left to argue. I started in the living room. The new sofa had a felt square stapled under its frame. I slid a finger beneath and pulled until the corner gave. A tag revealed the luxury store's name with the kind of pride that assumes no one will ever need to hide it. I took photo 01. In the hall closet, I lifted a shoebox that had once been Tom's place for cufflinks and found envelopes tucked in like sleeping animals. Invoices, returns, credits that did not credit me. I photographed each and put them back exactly, like I was laying evidence down to rest instead of to rise. In the study, inside the second drawer where I keep old neighborhood association minutes, I found the first bank statement. The balance owed marched down the page as if it had somewhere to be. $32,000. In the dining room buffet, under a pile of chargers we never used, a second statement waited. $24,000. Upstairs, in a linen closet where quilts go to hibernate, 2 more, 18 and 15. I sat on the landing carpet and added them with a carpenter's speed, lips moving. $89,000. I took photo 019, 020, 021. Numbers are heavy when you know where they were spent. On the island, hidden under a recipe binder I hadn't opened since Tom got sick, a manila folder lay perfectly square to the edge. Appraisal. The paper still smelled faintly of toner. I ran my thumb along the staple, felt the bite. $480,000. The figure I had already heard in my own kitchen, but here it had a witness seal. Behind it, a note about a deposit, $30,000. I frowned. We had no contract, no escrow. Who's 30? I took photo 027. At the bottom of the folder were printouts with highlighted phrases in a stranger's emphatic yellow. Owner's incapacity. Best interests. Protective sale. The language was clinical and kind until you read it twice. I looked at the verb tenses the way I look at load calculations. Present progressive, as if the process was underway, not proposed. I photographed those too, each page laid square, my hands careful, my breathing small. The kitchen trash gave up a receipt when I was not looking for it. The logo curled like a signature at the top, Sloane's handwriting in the margin, return if needed. Needed by whom was not a question I wrote down. I kept the bag exactly how I found it, and placed the receipt back like I could undo time. By 2 a.m., photographing had become a ritual, a way to pin the moths of fact to a board. Open, document, close, replace. I moved through the rooms with the quiet of someone who built them. Every discovery had 2 edges, the financial blade and the thinner one that cut at the trust muscle. I saw my reflection in the oven door and did not startle. I looked older than I felt and younger than I sounded. The diffuser's vanilla still threaded the air, a cheap veil over a clean truth. In the pantry, behind a stack of labeled bins that had rebranded my dry goods, I found a padded envelope heavy with paper. Return address, a P.O. box, but the stamp was local. I left it unopened. Discipline first, then dread. Near 3, I set my phone on the island and paged through the images. The screen turned my evidence into a slideshow. Tags, statements, printouts with the words I had refused to say about myself. I wrote the totals at the bottom of my notebook column and drew a square around the number as if a border could hold it steady. When I finally turned off the kitchen light, the dark returned like relief. I slid the padded envelope into the top drawer and shut it gently. My jaw ached from not saying anything to anyone. I stood in the doorway and looked at the 2 plates still waiting on the table, as if someone had reserved a future I hadn't agreed to. I still wanted to think maybe I'd misunderstood. Morning put a clean edge on fear. I made tea I didn't drink and opened the padded envelope with the care you use on a blister. Inside, a manila folder stamped in tidy black, Notary Aver 186. My throat went cold. I slid the contents out onto the island. Durable power of attorney. The title sat there like a verdict. The signature line below it held a name I know too well and didn't recognize. Eleanor Nora Whitaker, written in a hesitant hand that tried to imitate my own loops and failed by 1 cruel millimeter. The E was wrong. My wrist doesn't stutter on the upstroke. The N had a schoolteacher's flourish I never learned. My breath shortened, not from disbelief, but from the insult to muscle memory. A photocopy of my driver's license followed, the one I lost 3 years ago and replaced on a rain-soaked Tuesday. I touched the image as if texture could tell me which drawer of the universe had been picked. Paper clips had left small, rectangular bruises on the margins. The notary seal on the last page looked sleepy, its embossing too shallow, as if it had been pressed with caution instead of authority. I went very still. Panic is a loud thing that wants to move. I made it sit. By 10, I was in a small office on Maple with a brass plaque that read, Walter H. Crane, Notary Public, Nora 186. The door chimed a polite bell. The room smelled like ink pad and lemon cleaner. A wall calendar still sat on last month, as if time waited here for appointments. A man with careful hands and a tie that had survived more than one administration looked up and stood. Ms. Whitaker, he said, and his voice had the steady of a metronome. I'm Walter Crane, how can I help you? I placed the manila folder on his desk, the way you place a bird with a broken wing. Someone used your number, I said. And my name. He pulled on half-frame glasses and turned pages with a fingertip that never smeared. He examined the letterhead first. We stopped using this header style in 2019, he said, almost to himself. He held the seal page up to the light and adjusted his glasses. The embossing depth is inconsistent. My press leaves a full relief. This was done with a hand tool, likely off-market. He compared the notary signature to a card he kept in a small box. This is not my hand. He looked at the license copy next, then at me, then back at the copy. Do you still have this ID? I lost it, I said. Reported it. Replaced it, he nodded, a slow gravity. Ms. Whitaker, these documents are counterfeit. The letterhead is a reproduction. The seal is false. The signature is forged. Whoever did this attempted to use my commission number to lend credibility to a packet that has none. The air in the room thinned by a shade. What does that make it? I asked, though I knew the grammar of this already. A crime, he said simply. A federal crime when it touches a notary's commission and interstate mail. Exposure can be significant. In cases like this, 4 to 12 years is not unusual, depending on counts and cooperation. 4 to 12. Years measured not in radiators and winters, but in sentencing guidelines. The numbers landed in my sternum and knocked once. I recommend you file a complaint with the district attorney today, he continued. Bring the originals. I will provide a statement verifying these were not issued or executed by me. We can also notify the Secretary of State's office to flag my commission for attempted fraud. I nodded. The motion felt like I was testing whether my head still attached. Thank you, I said. The words came out in the voice I use when steel is an ingredient. He slid the folder back toward me as if returning a knife. I'm sorry you have to deal with this, he said, which in another mouth might have sounded like a platitude. From him it sounded like architecture, the kind that stands outside the day tilted too bright. I made it to the curb before the world did a small, slow spin. I put my palm against the car's roof to feel something that would not move. The metal was hot under the noon sun, the heat running through to my bones. I breathed until the sky steadied. Then I opened the door with a hand that did not look like it was shaking and sat very carefully, as if the seat might be a verdict too. I met Martin Keene in a corner suite that still smelled like graphite and case law. His office was half studio, half war room. A T-square leaned against shelves of reporters. An old plotter slept under a tarp. A brass scale rested beside a stack of yellow legal pads. He stood when I walked in. Sharp blue eyes that missed nothing, white hair combed like he intended to earn it. Warmth first, steel immediately after. Nora, he said, taking my hands in both of his. Sit. I set the manila folder on his desk and the sound it made felt heavier than paper. He opened it the way a surgeon peels back a dressing. No drama, only care. Forged POA, the photocopied ID, Walter Crane's notes. My small, blocky list of numbers, 32K, 24K, 18K, $15K. Appraisal at $480,000. Deposit note, $30,000. He read without interrupting. When he looked up, his eyes were clearer than the sky outside. First, he said, you did well. You documented. You didn't tip your hand. I shook, I said. After, not during. Good, he said. We'll let the shaking do its work later. He mapped steps in neat columns, handwriting that had never once panicked. Affidavit from Crane. DA complaint with originals. Notify the Secretary of State about the attempted notary fraud. Put your banks on alert for any third-party access attempts. Freeze credit pulls. We'll start a background check on the woman. We'll find her pattern and put daylight on it. Pattern, I repeated, the word landing like a measuring tape across a scar. He tapped the deposit note with a mechanical pencil. Whoever orchestrated this thinks like a contractor who shortcuts inspections. Enough polish to pass a glance, not enough structure to stand. Think fast. He looked back at the signature that wasn't mine. I suspect this isn't her first time. Something in me that had been clenched for days untied itself a fraction. It wasn't relief. It was oxygen. It got me as far as the end of his desk and then stopped. I pressed my palms to my knees like they were a bench that might steady. The tears came without heat. No theatrics, just water leaving a place it didn't belong. He slid the box of tissues toward me as if it were part of a contract review. You're allowed, he said. You're not breaking. You're releasing pressure so the structure doesn't fail. I built this place, I said, and surprised myself by not meaning the office. I'm not losing her to a smile with a budget. We'll move in 2 lanes, he said. Legal and narrative. You keep acting as if you don't know. Let her keep talking. I'll start the background. I'll also reach out to the interested buyer and ask for patience. Engineers understand integrity. He will wait if I ask the right way, I breathed. The room returned to its edges. We set times. What I would photograph next, what I would never sign, what I would put, where her hands could find it, and what I would lock, where only mine could. When I stood to go, he squeezed my shoulder, a brief pressure like a load test. Clock is ticking, he said. And we're ahead of it. That night, the house wore its ordinary evening routine like a robe. From the staircase, I could see the living room, the lamp throwing a domestic halo. Sloane tucked herself into the new sofa with a blanket the color of money and rested her head on Caleb's shoulder. Her brand screaming lounge set announced itself without sound. Caleb scrolled through something without seeing it. She laughed softly, practiced. Then, when he turned his face away, the smile fell off hers the way a theater mask slips once the audience leaves. Underneath was math again. Columns and outcomes. My son as a variable. I stood there until the shape of what I was seeing didn't require effort. Then I walked back to my room, shut the door, and dialed Martin. He picked up on the first ring. Do it, I said. Full background. All of it? Underway, he said. I'll have a folder for you soon. Good. I hung up and watched the door for a long time, like it might answer. The house didn't move. She simply held. The folder arrived 2 days later, hand-delivered by a kid from Martin's office who looked like he'd been told he was carrying uranium. I set it on the dining table and opened it with the same careful disrespect I give to rot. The contents hit like a drumline. First beat, a marriage certificate. Harris County, Texas. Sloane Mercer and Garrett Blake, July 14, 2017. Legal. Current. No dissolution on file. Bigamy wasn't a theory. It was a stamp. Second beat. Houston PD report. 2018. A complaint from a small business owner who alleged agent. Services that became access to accounts. Settlement. $20,000. Signed NDA. Martin had the public docket anyway. The ink had dried in a hurry. Third beat. Phoenix, 2020. Civil complaint under a different pretense, consulting on a property transfer for an elderly landlord. Threats of capacity issues floated in the language like oil on water. Settlement, $40,000, no criminal charges. Both parties agree to no admission of wrongdoing. The phrase was a bruise you could see through makeup. Fourth beat, Denver, 2022. Police report plus a withdrawn petition. Talent agent grift this time. Designer handbags, furniture, a man who thought he was loved until invoices started stealing his sleep. Settlement, $35,000. The pattern stepped to the next city like a dancer who knows her choreography. There were photos. Sloane with different hair but the same smile, shoulder to shoulder with a man whose eyes were in love with a future he'd never get to keep. There were aliases that were really just new spellings of herself. There were notes from an investigator in ballpoint. Targets older homeowners, uses relationship as credential. Talks like she's doing them a favor. Exit once cash secured or when challenged. I couldn't breathe for a moment. Not metaphorically. My lungs forgot the step. I put my palm on the table until breath remembered its job. Bigamy since 2017. Houston, Phoenix, Denver, 20, 40, 35. The numbers made a staircase I didn't want to climb, and I climbed it anyway because evidence doesn't care about your preferences. Downstairs, voices threaded up through the stairwell like steam. I moved to the landing and listened because that is what you do when the truth wants witnesses. Sloane. She can't keep dragging this out, Caleb. It's not safe for her. If you loved her, you would make her rest. You would make her sign the deed to us so we can take care of everything. Caleb. It's not that simple. Sloane. It's exactly that simple. We have an appraisal. We have a buyer. You said yourself she's been confused. One signature, and we can put this to bed. Caleb's voice again, tired in the way a man gets when he's been running in place. She isn't confused. She's grieving. That's not the same thing. Sloane's tone tightened. You love your mother more than me. That's what this is. I could hear him stand. The sofa springs gave him away. Don't do that. Then prove it, she said. Grow up and fix it. Silence. It went on long enough to become information. In the study, the folder lay open like a mouth, papers breathing proof. Marriage to Garrett Blake since 2017. Complaints and settlements in 3 cities. Houston 2018 for $20,000. Phoenix 2020 for $40,000. Denver 2022 for $35,000. Agent 1 year. Consultant the next. Girlfriend when profitable. Grifts that changed costumes and kept the plot. I closed the folder and slid it into the bottom drawer of the desk I had built with my hands. The lemon tree outside flicked its leaves against the glass like a signal. I wasn't shaky anymore. The fear had done its work and left behind something denser, war, but on my terms. Martin sent a tech who spoke in voltages and left me with a pocket full of secrets. Micro cameras hid where the eye is lazy. A pinhole in the return vent. A button lens in the spines of a matched set of faux law books Sloane had bought for texture, a 1080p eye inside the lamp finial over the desk. The living room frame with the watercolor. The glass was double-paned. The inner layer saw more than it showed. Each camera wrote to a card no larger than my thumbnail. Each card felt like a truth I wasn't ready to hold. I played my role. I set my keys in the fruit bowl, then forgot them, and asked out loud if anyone had seen my glasses while they sat on my head. I called the neighbor by her dog's name and apologized with a laugh. At lunch I said, conversational as weather, I've been thinking, maybe I should give Caleb POA. You know, just to make things easier. On the lamp camera, Sloane's eyes flared before her smile did. She kept cutting peppers, but I watched the calculation bloom and steady like a pilot light. That would be very responsible, she said. We could help with all the details. At night, I became an editor. The footage unspooled without music, the house a patient actor. In the study, the desk camera caught Sloane alone with my files. She didn't rifle. She curated. Folder, phone, click. She photographed documents the way a tourist photographs monuments, quick and practiced. The appraisal, the owner's incapacity printouts, Walter Crane's business card. The mic picked up the soft zipper of her tote like it was a confession. I labeled the clip, frame, study, 1537, Sloane photographs. Evidence loves a tidy name. Martin built me a spreadsheet. Columns that married my ATM withdrawals to Sloane's splurges. May 3, my $2,000 cash out at the branch on Elm. Same day, her boutique handbag charge for $1,899. June 11th, my $1,500 in 20s. That afternoon, luxury store sofa deposit $400. July 2nd, my $1,000. 2 hours later, salon and spa receipt for $985, including signature treatment. The rows lined up like studs on 16-inch centers. You could hang a case on them. The safe in my closet had been my last quiet thing. I ran my fingertips around the dial and felt tiny crescents where metal had kissed metal too hard. Pick marks. Fresh, shy, almost invisible unless you know to look. A faint spray of black paint dusted the inside threshold where an impatient tool had nicked the finish. I opened it and did the count the way I do math when the numbers have weight. There had been $15,000. There was $7,300 remaining. $7,700 gone like a breath you didn't give permission to take. From the hallway camera, Sloane practicing phone tones, gentle, urgent. We're just trying to keep everything safe for her. From the kitchen camera, Caleb rubbing the bridge of his nose while Sloane lined up pill bottles for a woman who didn't need her to. She photographed the labels, click, click, click. I staged another line in passing, tied like ribbon around nothing. Maybe after the buyer's second visit, we'll just move forward, I said to the air, as if the idea had occurred to me because the sun hit the counter right. In the playback, Sloane's mouth did a small involuntary thing, a tightening and release you only see if you watch her like a hawk. My phone buzzed. Martin, got your pulls and her purchases. Clean overlaps. Keep performing. I texted back a single word, copy. That night I watched myself on screen. A woman moving through her own rooms like a decoy and felt a dark, illicit satisfaction shiver through me when the timestamps aligned and the angles told the story I needed told. I closed the laptop at 2 and stood over the safe again, fingers on the tiny scratches until the metal warmed. I wasn't angry. Anger is messy. I was building. Give her more rope, I said to the quiet. Martin made the call to Ethan Caldwell with the kind of professional courtesy that carries weight. There are some title wrinkles, he said, but the property's structural integrity is excellent. If you'd like a second look, Friday would be best. Engineers respect clocks. Ethan did. He texted Sloane and Caleb through the group thread she had created without asking me. Could I do a walkthrough Friday late afternoon? He wrote. Sloane answered in 5 seconds. Absolutely. Friday is perfect. I could hear the exclamation point from the next room. When she told me, her smile sharpened at the edges. A shark smile, all enamel and forward motion. This is good news, Nora, she said. Momentum matters. I nodded and set the milk in the pantry, then frowned down at it as if the carton had betrayed me. Where does this go again? I asked. Sloane glided past and placed it in the fridge like a magician returning a coin to a pocket. You've got so much on your mind, she purred. In the kitchen, I let the kettle sing longer than I ever allow. Caleb bounded in and clicked it off, worried. Mom, you okay? Just wool gathering, I said, tapping the cabinet where the mugs live and opening the one with spices instead. Maybe it's time to make some changes. The sentence hung there with deliberate innocence. Sloane looked up from her phone, the way a cat looks up when it hears the exact sound it wants. What kind of changes? She asked lightly. Oh, small ones, I said. Paperwork, responsibilities. I set 2 cups on the counter, and then a third, and then stared at them as if surprised there were more than 2. Sometimes I think someone else should handle forms, powers of attorney, that sort of thing. Caleb's face was a study in conflict, not stupidity. He knew me too well to believe the performance entirely and not well enough to call it. We don't have to rush anything, he said, voice gentle, eyes searching. We can just see how Friday goes. Of course, I said, misplacing the jar of honey into the drawer with the pot holders and leaving it there like a breadcrumb. No rush. Later he stood in my doorway instead of entering, as if the line of the jam could negotiate for him. If you really want me to handle things, I will, he said. But only if you want that, not because someone else does. I kept my eyes on the sweater I was folding and let my voice be soft enough to believe. I know. I was only thinking out loud. I looked up and let him see the fatigue I had rehearsed. It's been a lot. He crossed the threshold then, pulled by something older than this mess. I hate that you're carrying it, he said. I'm not, I lied kindly. We are. In the living room, Sloane paced while on a call I wasn't supposed to hear. Yes, Friday, she said. Second visit. She's coming around. We might get POA in place before then. She hung up and pivoted, her glow returning like a stage light warming. She tucked herself under Caleb's arm when he joined her and tilted her face up for a kiss she meant me to clock in my peripheral vision. We're a team, she told him. loud enough for the house to sign as witness. By Thursday, I had put 3 more forgetful moments into the air like pollen. A burner left on for a beat too long before I clicked it off. A bill in the outgoing mail with a stamp crooked and then straightened by Sloane's neat fingers. A relabeled spice that turned cumin into cinnamon for a second before anyone tasted anything. Each slip was plausible. Each slip seeded a narrative. At dinner, I floated the line like a leaf on calm water. If we do this, I said, maybe Sloane should have POA. She's so organized. Caleb has work. He shouldn't be burdened. The glow that rose in her was not warmth. It was voltage. She nodded, performing modesty that didn't fit. Only if it helps you, she said, already arranging the future in her head. Friday, then, Caleb said, trying to sound neutral and landing on hopeful. Ethan at 5. Friday, I echoed. The word rang in the wood. The house listened. Leonard Pike's building peeled like a sunburn. Beige paint curled from stucco. A metal security door rasped when I pulled it, and a paper sign pointed up a stairwell that smelled like old coffee and carpet glue. On the second landing, a plaque tried for legitimacy. Leonard Pike, Notary Public, Commission, Dara 243. The edges were tarnished. The screws didn't match. I had a brooch pinned high on my collar, an enamel lemon I'd bought at a flea market years ago. Its clasp hid a lens and a mic. The red light was buried where no one would see it unless they meant to. Pike's office was a rectangle of stale air. A humming box fan shoved the smell of toner and cologne from one corner to the other. The man himself stood up as if launching from a spring. Cheap suit with the knees already bagging, tie with a sheen that came from a factory, not from care. He smiled in a way that showed you his gums. Ms. Whitaker, he said, oily cadence already trying to grease the wheels. Have a seat. At your age, best to get these things squared away while you're still clear. Sloane was already in the chair beside mine, legs crossed, red nails aligned on a leather folder. We've brought the documents we discussed, she said. All efficiency, no oxygen. On the desk, a durable power of attorney packet sat prepared with sticky flags, my name typed where my hand was supposed to finish the job. We'll just need your signature there. And there, an initial here, Pike said, uncapping a pen like a maitre d' unsheathing a carving knife. He slid the page toward me. This is for your own good, or for yours. I asked mildly, and the room's temperature changed by 1, maybe 2 degrees. He chuckled as if I were charming. Very good, he said, pointing with the pen tip. Sign within the lines. I let my fingers close around the barrel and took the pen inches from paper. The brooch cam caught the slight tremor in my hand. I made sure he saw, and Sloane recognized. Just there, she murmured, leaning in, the faintest whiff of expensive vanilla moving the air. We'll take it from here. At your age, Pike added, amiable as a warning, it's prudent to let the younger generation manage the heavy lift. I set the pen down so softly it made no sound. No, I said, the word did not rise. It sat, heavy as a stone. Sloane blinked, once, slow. A hairline crack splintered her facade. Not the smile, not the posture, but a tiny muscle at the jaw that betrayed the math going sideways. Nora, she said, low and coaxing, we talked about this. I said I'd think, I answered. I've thought. Pike tried again, a salesman changing angles. Nothing changes day to day, he soothed. We simply centralize decision-making. If, for instance, the house were to be sold, my property, I said, turning to meet his eyes, is not your example. I pushed the packet back across the desk with one finger. I won't be signing today. Silence pressed in. The box fan pushed it around. Sloane's smile stayed on her mouth but left her eyes entirely. You're being difficult, she said, voice ribboned with sugar and teeth. This is exactly why we're here. And now you've learned exactly why it won't work, I said, standing. Good afternoon, Mr. Pike. His gaze flicked just once to the brooch, then to my hands, then back to the signature line that would not be filled. We can reschedule, he offered, a last smear of oil on a locked hinge. I won't, I said. I opened the door into a hallway of scuffed baseboards and walked, heart steady. Down the stairs into light that felt honest. Martin's car idled at the curb, the passenger door already unlocked. I slid in and shut it, breath finally leaving like steam from a kettle. "Got it?" he asked, eyes on the rear view. I unclipped the brooch and placed it in his palm. "Every word," I said. He nodded once, put the car in gear, and we left Leonard Pike's plaque to tarnish on its own. 3 days of silence followed. Sloane floated through rooms without sound, smile repaired, eyes doing hard math. Caleb worked late and came home tired of pretending it was just work. I cooked simple things and waited for the house to finish listening. On the 4th morning, Martin and I did one last call, the plan laid out like elevations. "Invitations go to 4, he said. "Me, Ethan Caldwell, Walter H. Crane, Garrett Blake. Caleb?" I asked, though we both knew the answer. "He learns with everyone," Martin said. "Truth lands better in a room that won't let it wriggle away." We set the time. 7 p.m. dinner. We fixed the language for the messages. When I texted Sloane, "Dress well. It's going to be a memorable night." I could feel the answering spark in her reply without needing to read it. The day of, I cooked Tom's favorites because justice should taste like something. Braised short ribs low and patient until the bones gave up. Rosemary potatoes crisped in the oven. Green beans with lemon and toasted almonds snapping bright on the tongue. A salad with shaved fennel and orange because he liked the way bitterness and sweet refused to cancel the other. For dessert, an apple pie with the good crust, butter folded into flour like a story told right. I brewed a pot of strong tea for me and set coffee to steep for the guests. I set the table as if laying an altar. The Lenox china came down from the upper cabinet, the set we'd saved for and then used anyway because every ordinary day deserved ceremony. The Waterford crystal caught the late light and threw it in small, clear prisms across the cloth. Silverware aligned with soldier calm. Linen napkins ironed until they agreed to behave. I put Tom's place at the head out of habit, then moved it 1 chair down and took the head myself. Not a usurpation, a succession. I walked the rooms to be sure the house and I were in step. The projector waited on a cart in the dining room, cables coiled like leashes. The screen was rolled and ready, folders labeled and stacked, appraisal and deposit, debt, Crane statement, folder, Blake, audio. The lemon brooch lay on my dresser like a medal. Upstairs I chose armor, a navy dress that fit like respect, not distraction. Low heels I could run the house in. A strand of pearls Tom had once joked made me look like a woman juries listen to. I pinned my hair up with ruthless kindness and looked at my face until I could see both grief and resolve without flinching. From down the hall, the closet door Sloane used stood slightly open. Inside, a tight red dress waited on a velvet hanger, daring the night to notice it. Good. Let contrast do some of the talking. At 6:45, I put candles into brass holders and lit them one by one. The house warmed an extra half degree, stage lights rising. I put the seating cards out with a precision I didn't need to explain to anyone. Martin Keene at my right, Ethan Caldwell opposite me, Walter H. Crane near the projector cart, Garrett Blake beside Ethan, Caleb between Martin and me. I left the chair at the end of the table nameless. I wiped a non-existent fingerprint from the crystal and stepped back. The house felt like a stage I had designed years ago for a play I didn't know I'd have to star in. The lines were learned. The cues were set. I checked the time. When the bell rang, it was exactly 7. They arrived in the order I'd planned, as if the house were cueing them from the wings. Martin first, punctual as a metronome, a brief squeeze of my hand. Ethan Caldwell next, clean and grave, eyes already taking in corners and spans. Walter H. Crane after, neat tie, careful hands, a leather portfolio he treated like a witness. Last came Garrett Blake, taller than in the photos, grease under his nails that soap could not convince, jaw set for whatever this was. Caleb and Sloane were already seated. I took the head of the table. "Thank you for coming," I said. "We'll begin." The room dimmed. The projector hummed. Exhibit 1 filled the screen, a crisp scan, Harris County marriage certificate. "1 page," I narrated. Sloane Mercer married to Garrett Blake, July 14, 2017. No divorce decree on file. Caleb's shoulders ticked inward by half an inch. Sloane didn't blink. Garrett didn't sit. He planted his hands on the chair back, voice clean as a cut. "We married in a courthouse with a broken air conditioner," he said. "I've been looking for you since Phoenix." You didn't vanish. You just changed names. On screen, Exhibit 2 snapped up, Houston PD complaint, 2018 with the settlement sheet beside it. $20,000, I said. Paid under an agreement you wrote, Sloan. Exhibit 3, Phoenix Civil Case 2020. The highlighted clause, no admission of wrongdoing, flared yellow. $40,000, I said. Caleb's hands slid off the table into his lap. Exhibit 4, Denver Report 2022. A furniture invoice. A police report. A $35,000 settlement letter. Ethan exhaled through his nose, one short measure of disbelief. Sloane's jaw worked once, then smoothed. Exhibit 5, audio waveform. I clicked play. Sloane's voice flooded the room, intimate and cold. The old woman is caving. We might get POA in place before Friday. Caleb's head came up, but not to look at her. He looked at me, and then at the screen, and then away. Exhibit 6, hallway camera still. Sloane rifling the hall locker, phone out, flash off. Then, a short clip from the study, her photographing the appraisal and capacity printouts, click, click, click. Documentation, I said. Taken without consent. Exhibit 7, spreadsheet columns pairing my ATM withdrawals and her purchases. The green bars lined up like studs. Martin's voice, calm, carried from my right. May 3rd, Nora's $2,000 withdrawal. Same day, $1,899 handbag purchase. June 11th, $1,500 withdrawal. $400 sofa deposit. July 2nd, $1,000 withdrawal. $985 spa charge. Exhibit 8, a still of the safe close shot of the fresh pick marks around the dial. Then my handwritten count. $15,000 originally, I said. $7,300 remaining. Explicit theft of $7,700. Caleb flinched like the number hit him in the chest. He pressed his palms together between his knees, knuckles whitening. Exhibit 9, appraisal cover and the $30K deposit note. I let the number fill the wall. $30,000 placed as deposit without a contract, I said. Mr. Caldwell, that money did not come from me. Ethan's face tightened. He sat straighter, as if the chair had told him something impolite. I wired no deposit, he said. If someone told you I did, Ms. Mercer, they lied. Exhibit 10, Crane's letterhead and affidavit. Walter Crane stood just enough to be heard and believed. These are counterfeit, he said. The seal is false. The signature is not mine. I have filed a formal complaint. I let the projector idle on the forged, durable power of attorney. The wrong loops in my wrong name glowed like a bruise. Garrett stepped forward until his shadow crossed Sloane's shoes. He didn't raise his voice. You always find a man with good hands and a house with good bones, he said. And then you sell the one to finance yourself through the other. You found a fool with his own house, Sloane. Again. She laughed once, the sound that had always been more enamel than throat. You're drunk on pity, she hissed, but the mask was slipping. Garrett didn't bother with anger. You are the lover, he said, quiet and brutal. Not the partner. Caleb's what? Came out small like a child waking up. He looked at her as if distance could make a familiar face rearrange into sense. It didn't. I clicked the projector off. The bulbs cooled with a faint tick. The candles returned as the only flame. Sloane, I said, do you want to explain the missing $30,000? The $7,700, the forged notary, the marriage certificate. She rose half out of her chair, smile back on like a helmet. This is a performance, she said. An old woman's paranoia feeding an audience. Walter Crane closed his portfolio. I will be testifying, he said simply. Martin placed a hand flat on the table. And the district attorney has been notified. Ethan stood. I will be retrieving my consideration, he said, in court if needed. Garrett took a step back, as if making room for the next act. The room held its breath. The doorbell rang. Right on time. Part 14, Cuffs and Fallout. 2 plainclothes, DA officers came in with the night's cool on their jackets. They didn't take the food in with their eyes. They took the room's temperature instead. The older one addressed Sloane with the practiced neutrality of a man who had heard every story twice. Sloane Mercer, he said, you are under arrest for forgery, fraud, and theft. This isn't over, she said. Pleasant as poison. For you it is, I answered, and the words didn't rise. They settled. They read her rights with crisp syllables. She tried on 3 expressions in 5 seconds, and none of them fit. When the cuffs clicked, Caleb flinched again, smaller this time, like echo. Garrett stepped aside. Ethan folded his arms. Walter Crane gave his card to an officer with a nod. The door closed behind them. The house exhaled, and then everything got very quiet. The projector was still cooling, ticking like a far clock. The short ribs had gone from glossy to matte. Steam off the potatoes thinned, then stopped. Somewhere a branch tapped the window. The lemon tree, keeping time. Caleb spoke without lifting his head. How long did you know? Long enough to be sure, I said. Not long enough to lose the element that makes truth stick. He pressed his hand over his mouth. The muscles in his forearm jumped. I let her... He stopped, swallowed. I don't know who I am in this. You're my son, I said. You were targeted. You were managed. That is not the same as being foolish. His laugh broke in the middle. I should have protected you. You can start now, I said. By hearing me. He nodded, eyes wet and furious with himself. Then tell me, I did. I gave him the sequence the way a builder talks a crew through a plan. The vanilla diffuser and the 2 plates. The midnight audit. The tag from the luxury store. The bank statements in their 4 stacks, 32K, 24K, 18K, 15K. The forged envelope in Walter Crane's office where the word federal stopped the room. Martin's columns marrying my withdrawals to her purchases. The safe with its tiny half-moons of scratch and the counted $7,300 remaining. The brooch cam. Leonard Pike and his at-your-age voice. The decision to hold the table for tonight. He let his head fall back against the chair and stared at the ceiling we'd painted 3 summers ago. You should have told me sooner. You wouldn't have believed me without evidence, I said. You would have believed her performance of concern over my performance of age. He winced and accepted it because it was the only currency that spent. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry. I know, I said. I folded a linen napkin along its crease and set it down, right angles returning to themselves. You and I will decide what comes next. Not in this minute. Not with this heat. But we will. The room chose new proportions. Martin collected the folders as a man gathers tools at the end of a job. Walter Crane shook Ethan's hand and then mine. Garrett paused at the threshold. I'll file in the morning, he said quietly. Divorce this time. He looked at me then, something like respect where suspicion had lived. You did what the rest of us tried to do too late. When the door closed, the house held only us and the hum of a projector cooling toward silence. Caleb stood like a man deciding how to use his hands again. He looked at my chair, then at Tom's old chair, now mine. He didn't sit. He walked around the table and put his palm on the back of my seat, like an oath. We start now, he said. We do, I answered. The clock ticked once, exactly on time. Morning arrived square and undecorated. I set an envelope on the kitchen island as if it were a level on a beam. When Caleb came in, he looked like he hadn't slept, which felt factual rather than dramatic. He stopped when he saw the envelope, then looked at me the way a man looks at a sign that might also be a warning. It's the deed, I said. To the apartment on Willow, your name recorded once the county opens. But hear me before you open it. He nodded and put both hands on the counter as if bracing for weather. This is a contract, I said, not a gift. 3 conditions, clear and enforceable. I held up one finger. 1, you live there alone. No guests moving in, no key quietly duplicated, no arrangements that complicate what we just corrected. A second finger. 2, you work. Any honest work. I don't care if you start by stocking shelves at midnight. Your hands need to remember they can build. A third finger. 3, Sunday dinners. Every week, 6 p.m. here. We rebuild where we broke, at the table where it started. He swallowed. His eyes were already glassy, and he hadn't blinked. I'll do all of it, he said, voice small and certain. Say it back, I said. I live alone, he repeated. I work. I show up on Sundays at 6. Every week, I slid the envelope to him. There's a spare key on top of the deed. Utilities transfer instructions are taped to the back. He let out a breath that shook. I don't deserve this. Maybe not, I said. But we're not trading in desserts. We're rebuilding a line. Don't let me down, Caleb. I waited for the flinch and then gave him the only line that mattered. More importantly, don't let yourself down. He pressed the envelope to his chest like a book he'd finally decided to read. I won't. He packed in an hour the way a man evacuates, the clothes he actually wears, a coffee mug he never admitted he liked, a framed photo from a summer I can still name by the sound of the sprinklers. At the door he turned, raw and younger than his age, and hugged me with both arms and no strategy. I felt the old shape of my boy inside the size of the man. When he stepped into the hall, he looked back once. "Sunday," he said. "Sunday," I answered. The door closed. It made a different sound than it had in months. Not the soft hush of someone slipping out to manage me, not the rushed slam of a lie late for its appointment. This was a firm, contained click. The house heard it. Home reclaimed. Time, even when it behaves, doesn't apologize. The case moved through its weeks like a file sliding from one tray to another. Statements, hearings, filings with the same names and different dates. In the end, the judge said the number out loud, and the room agreed to believe it. 8 years. Fraud, forgery, theft. The ledger found its balance. Ethan Caldwell was reimbursed. The $30,000 he never sent, but somehow lost, reappeared through restitution and insurance, as if the money had simply been on a long, humiliating walk. Garrett Blake filed for divorce the next morning, the petition neat and brief. Some papers know how to stand up straight. I did not redesign the house. I restored her. I painted the dining room back to the quiet white that receives a day without arguing with it. I sold the velvet chair that was always trying to be photographed. I kept the wallpaper sample Sloan had left in a drawer and used the blank back to test stains for a new oak bench. Small changes that corrected the pitch. The study became an architecture workshop, just as it had been for the version of me who knew how to live on coffee and grit. I pushed the desk against the north wall for consistent light and stacked rolls of tracing paper like columns. On Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, the room filled with women who had raised families or buried them or survived careers that wouldn't learn their names. We learned to read plans. We learned how a level tells the truth. We built shelf brackets out of scrap and then hung them straight. The first time Irene set a cabinet cleat and hit studs on the first try, she laughed the laugh of a girl she hadn't been in 40 years. I went home with sawdust in my hair and a chest that didn't ache. Sundays fixed themselves to the calendar and refused to move. Caleb arrived at 6 with small, humble offerings the way a penitent might bring candles. A paper-wrapped loaf still warm through the bag. A fistful of carnations with wet stems. A jar of olives he claimed were on sale, though I saw the receipt. He told me about work that started as temporary and turned into responsibility. He listened when I told him how to deglaze a pan without burning the fond. We sat at the table with its old scars and its new polish and practiced talking like people who had shared both versions of the story. The one we lived, and the one we almost let happen to us. The lemon tree out back did what it always does. Set thorns, then blossoms, then fruit. One morning in early spring, the light arrived across the floor in the angle I had drawn for it in 1995, and the tree caught it leaf by leaf like a choir taking breath. I understood then that the miracle wasn't the rescue. It was the refusal. The wealth I own is what I do not surrender. The house I built, the name I sign, the line I draw at my own threshold. Sometimes I sit by the lemon tree in the last inch of sun and feel the house listening. I think about Tom's hand on my sternum and his last instruction, take care of her. I repeat it back to him in the language of floors, swept and hinges oiled and shelves hung level. Women from the workshop bring me sweetbread now and then, or flowers wrapped in newsprint. We talk about soffits and courage. We practice a truth I intend to keep handing out until my voice goes, dignity has no age. I am not sentimental about surviving. I am particular. I keep my tools sharp and my boundaries sharper. When the light slides off the wall and the evening takes the yard back for itself, I rest my palm against the bark, feel the strength running up into the leaves, and let my mouth bend into something that isn't quite a smile. Old lionesses don't roar to prove anything. They look over what's theirs. They keep their claws sharp, their heart steady.